spam the smokes and we're gonna move up.
Yeah, when we get the draw, I'll drop ammo boxes.
Alright.
Move directly up the beach as quickly as possible.
Get your water wings on, boys.
Don't get stuck here, keep moving.
Bro, I got stuck in that fucking boat.
Not die there.
And now I just got killed because it took me off the map.
What the fuck?
I'm so fucking mad. What the fuck?
Never mind, I died.
Well, you guys make it up here. I got some supplies up here. Just another day at the beach. When you were a kid, did any of you ever play Pretend War? Like, go into the park and pretend to be soldiers like in World War II, or fighting some sort of large battle with a bunch of kids. Whenever I play Hell Let Loose, I'm basically reliving that moment. Hell Let Loose is a first-person 50 versus 50 shooter where you play as either the Axis or Allies across a variety of maps that you might recognize from episodes of Band of Brothers. And that's because a lot of these fights you fight in are fights that the 101st Airborne Division actually fought in. But you can also see it in other maps such as Karatan, Purple Heart Lane, and Sainte Mere Église. Speaking of which, the visuals in this game are pretty impressive. Although there is no destructibility to the maps themselves, the amount of destruction on display with the maps themselves is very impressive. The maps are very detailed, with homes being sacked, buildings and farms being abandoned or destroyed, and several other little attentions to details, such as rubble piles and bodies, along with hedgehogs and whatnot all across maps such as Omaha and Utah Beach. On that note, the guns look and feel pretty good. Not a gun expert at all, but this all looks familiar to other World War II shooters from yesteryear. Your character moves pretty smoothly, and the characters can drop realistically. From time to time, they will ragdoll with hilarious results. In some cases, you can have your characters just blow up in gruesome clouds of viscera. This game's definitely earned its M rating, that's for sure. To add to this, the game also opts for minimalist HUD by default. So things like magazine count, objective statuses, and highlighted objectives are often left out. Don't worry, they are accessible briefly with the press of a button, but for the most part, the only game elements you're looking at is your team's class icon on nameplate, assuming you have it on at 100 meters or more. Although some of the animations can look a little janky, such as climbing over fences and rocks and the occasional clipping through walls, these events are a little on the rare side, and for the record, it does seem that with each patch, these seem to become less and less noticeable as well as less and less reoccurring. That being said, you remember that line from the beginning of the video? Well, he was upset that he couldn't get out of his landing craft. Not in the sense that he couldn't get out without getting killed, as in he was literally stuck in place and died when the boat animation went back and took him outside the map area. I wouldn't normally laugh at this as a 1 in a million glitch, but I had the same thing happen to me a couple times. He's right, that is frustrating, and we'll get back to that later. Now keep in mind that this is a small studio with a relatively small publisher. Even with all that, this game overall does look like a AAA game at times. With that being said, ultimately you want to make sure that your rig is running the game for prioritizing high FPS performance rather than graphical performance. In fact, having your graphics setting with all those high texture qualities and lighting effects can be detrimental to you, as grass and vegetation can obscure enemies for you and lower quality textures reduce the amount of stuff on screen, making targeting enemies a lot easier. This means playing at a high resolution or high graphical settings can actually make the game harder for you rather than playing at medium to low settings. This is a shame, as when the game is running on a higher settings, it's stunning, but without them you can actually reach your 90 plus frames per second and make the game much more smoother and easier to play effectively. I do hope that the developers find a way to allow the game to be enjoyed with the best of both worlds, so to speak. Let's talk about sound design. Pretty decent. Simplest way to describe is it's very cinematic. Your guns sound impactful, machine gun rounds sound whizzing by, hitting sandbags or walls near you sound like something you hear from Saving Private Ryan. Very Hollywood. Same with the vehicle sounds. The engines sound old and industrial. You usually hear a tank rolling in before you actually see them, and that can be terrifying. Furthermore, the explosions sound intense. Every update they seem to improve on them. Now the explosions sound impactful. Mixed in with the visuals, they're pretty damn terrifying. Put on a good pair of headphones and hearing the bullets whiz by while shells start exploding near you can really immerse yourself and feel like you're on the set of a World War II movie. And that's an important distinction to make. This game has some simulation elements to it. Your characters can hold their breath. Your character can only operate weapons that they're trained to use. This meaning that you can't just pick up weapons and ammo off fallen soldiers and start shooting. And you also can't just jump into a tank and be able to start blasting rounds into an enemy garrison. No, if you want to shoot an MP40, you need to have a class that has access to that weapon. And in some cases, you need to spend enough time with that particular class to unlock that gun as a part of your alternative loadout. With that being said, it's still not really that much of a simulation. It's way more arcadey than it is trying to reenact what it's like to be a soldier in World War II. You can run for effectively forever. This way it's not as much of a drag to get across the map. Everyone can operate the transport and supply vehicles, meaning in a pinch you can get supplies across the map or get soldiers across the map without having to be trained to be a transport driver. Controls for the tank themselves are relatively simple, especially if you compare them to other games such as Red Orchestra 2. Although there is a bullet drop mechanic, there isn't much in terms of windage or anything else to make it a shooting simulator either. Movement is slow and gunfights are quick, and 1 or 2 bullets is all that's needed out of nearly every weapon to kill or down an opponent. However, unlike other games that punish you for dying, such as Siege or Squad, Hell Let Loose is a little more forgiving. You may only need to wait a few seconds, or at worst a minute, to spawn and join the fight again. This helps keep the overall action hot and makes these teams of 50 feel more like teams of 100 at times. So what is the objective of this game? Well, to make things simple, it's a lot like the Conquest mode from Battlefield. You have several objectives to take or defend in any given map depending on your team, and you need to take and prevent the opposing team from, well, taking them. Instead of tickets, you have nodes, little buildable and destructible structures, which provide one of 3 resources: manpower, fuel, or munitions, all of which are used by your team for a wide variety of purposes. From dictating how many respawns or how long in between respawns your team has, to deploying tanks, sending out recon planes, and calling in bombing runs. These nodes are your lifeline in battle, and often the team that is able to build and manage their resources the best are the ones that are most likely to win. There is also the unique aspect of Hell Let Loose with the idea of outposts and garrisons. You can only spawn in one of those 2 types of areas. Outposts can be placed in or around enemy and friendly controlled territory and are used exclusively by your squad. Destroying them is as simple as running up to them. While garrisons can only be placed inside friendly controlled territory, they can be used by anyone, meaning everyone in your team of 50 can start spawning out of one garrison. These are a bit more resilient, as you have to get right next to them to dismantle them from up close, or until recently, throw some explosives at them. Only squad leaders can create outposts, and only squad leaders and the commander can make garrisons, so keeping both of them alive is essential for making or coordinating large team offensives, or setting up defensive lines. Now, how do you try to coordinate a team of 50 in a real-time battle? Well, sometimes it's like herding a bunch of cats. This is why the voice and text chats have 3 channels for communication. You have your squad chat, which only your squad mates can hear, your proximity chat, which only teammates within a certain proximity can hear, and an officer chat, which only the commander and squad leaders can hear. This does work most of the time, however, in its worst cases, your ears are getting bombarded with shrieks and whining and chaos of the team and battlefield. This is why having a headset or microphone is nearly essential, especially when or if you ever think about taking up a leadership position, such as a squad leader or a commander. Long story short, being a squad leader or commander can be fun for some, but to others it can feel more like taking up another job after your actual job. It's stressful, demanding, and requires you to work for a bunch of ungrateful idiots, and that's the game at its worst. At its best, it's super satisfying, rewarding, and hilarious to have to coordinate a squad, or make a successful push into an enemy position, or even have your squad just do something as simple as take out a tank that's harassing several other squads. Myself, I like being a medic. Playing a support-based class in this game can be very effective for a team.
Save your bandage, Yuji.
Thanks, Cat. Oh, you think you can heal our officer over there?
If you can scoop them up.
Keeping my team's machine gunner alive longer to keep suppressing our enemy's position or saving a squad leader so we can successfully advance to our new forward position is extremely fun for me personally. This doesn't mean I won't or can't change my role later throughout the game. Often with a few exceptions, such as squad leaders or commanders, you will probably find yourself changing roles to what your squad and team will need. Have a few enemy tanks harassing your garrison? We'll have you and a squad mate deploy as an anti-tanker and supply runner to refill those bazooka or panzer rockets. Your team needs to build nodes so you guys will have enough supplies to win? Well, then have your squad deploy as a supplier and an engineer, sneak behind enemy lines or towards enemy lines and build resource nodes that your team will use in the long run. Your squad's been asked to make an offensive push into the strong point? Well, then get into your riflemen and assault classes, light covering fire as you advance. That's something I think I like the most about this game, is the fact that there is no jack-of-all-trades character, not one class that will be the best class to have at any given situation. They all have their own specializations and their own uses, and you'll have to adjust accordingly depending on the battle. And although yeah, an FPS game needs you to do or have some knowledge of how to point your mouse to another player and left click, but this game more often than not rewards a player for better positioning or being clever around an enemy rather than having the best reflexes. Not to say that veterans of Twitch shooters like people coming from Call of Duty or Counter-Strike don't have an advantage, but I found that staying low, flanking an enemy squad, or even just finding a tree or a rock to take pot shots at people running across a field is more effective than simply treating the game like a game of King of the Hill from Halo 3. Games can and do swing in both directions very quickly. One time your team could be at the brink of defeat, but one good push or one poorly placed enemy garrison or lack thereof can completely change the tide of the battle. At its best, these moments are awesome, but at its worst, this game can be a slaughter, with teams spending up to an hour and a half fighting over the same strong point. These can be the exhausting and frustrating games. However, the developers did do slight things to kind of help relieve this a bit, adding transport and supply trucks in order to speed up movement and ensure that tactics like getting a squad behind enemy lines is more possible. This works for flatter maps, but for more forested maps like Hill 400 and Hurricane Forest, which often have a lot of trees and bush covering and preventing trucks and tanks from going through, you're less effective as you're stuck to the main roads, and especially by near the midpoint of the game, these roads are just suicide paths, leading mostly with enemy mines and anti-tank mines.
There's a lot of you in the way.
Get out of the way, this driver's been drinking.
Now back to what I mentioned before in the beginning. At its best, this game makes me feel like I'm playing that game of Capture the Flag with all of my friends. Or that I'm actually playing an episode of Band of Brothers. And those moments are awesome. From flanking an enemy machine gun nest and supporting your team or your squads for a push, or keeping your team alive during an intense firefight in order for you guys to complete a capture. But like those games of tag or capture the flag, it's also largely dependent on who you are playing with. That being said, the community for the most part of my 130 hours of playing is pretty good. Sure, there are a few jerks here and there with only a handful of straight up trolls team killing or gimping our team. This is usually in the form of teammates straight up ignoring their commanders or squad leads. And in some rare occasions, players think that they actually are members of Easy Company from Band of Brothers. Meaning they are acting like completely assholes and giving the game and their teammates no chill whatsoever.
Hey, fuckface. This is a strategic game. If you don't want to follow orders and do it, go play Call of Duty.
I could play casual.
This game
if
is
I
about
want
coordinating
to,
and
I
working
could-
with your team.
I could play casual
Suck
if I
my
want
balls.
to.
Yeah,
My
dog.
shit,
This
pussy.
game isn't Battlefield, bro.
I don't give a
Yeah,
fuck.
that's nowhere near the squad. He's not helping us at all, and he's talking shit. Go play Call of Duty, you piece of shit.
I'm talking shit because you're getting so angry about a fucking video game.
That being said, this is more of the exception than the rule, and I do find that certain servers are more prone to having a few of these guys than others. Funny enough, the servers that promote and more importantly moderate their servers tend to have less toxic teams. These are also the servers that tend to fill up the quickest, and on average, for me at least, I find more fun to play, and I get more of those World War II team shooter moments. Like I said, this game, as of recording, is still in early access, and once you get into a match, this will be a little hard to tell, but boy does it make itself apparent in the main menu. The menus are functional, but bare bones. For absolutely new players to this game, other than a few paragraphs on class description and game modes, there is little to nothing in terms of an in-game tutorial or practice mode. Sure, there's nothing stopping you and a friend from going into an empty server and quote-unquote messing around until you figure things out, or getting a friend who already knows the game a bit to teach you the ropes, or watch a few YouTube videos, or join one of the Hell Let Loose Discord servers. Oh, there's even a couple Reddit posts that help go into some tutorials on how to play the game effectively. Or hell, even just asking people in-game to give you some advice or pointers. Like I said, most of the team here are pretty chill and helpful. However, with that said, in my opinion, this is where the early access bit sticks its ugly head the most. You're kind of thrown into the deep end there, and this game can be complicated. There are lots of nuances to it, like where to build nodes, how to fortify positions, where to build your garrisons or outposts. These are all things that aren't apparent to you, and although there are videos and resources out there to learn it, it's these little things like being thrown into the deep end, especially with a game like Hell Let Loose, and the first thing people tell you to do is go into the options menu and change your friendly name tag displayer from 50 meters to 150 meters minimum. It's very strange. Personally, it's little things like that that make me kind of go, yeah, this is an early access game. Little tiny things, like I said, like people glitching through floors or walls, minor things like that, to even more frustrating things like having your microphone not be able to read, or having people in your squads not being able to hear you, forcing you to use one of the 3 keyboard chats, which obviously means you're not paying attention to your surroundings because you have to type out a message. Changing some default options like the nameplate visibility, or even offering something like a more comprehensible guide to the classes and objectives of the game would be nice. However, I do think this will change as the game transitions closer to release. And in general, these are nitpicks. Complaining about having to go into my settings to adjust icon visibility and chat volume is way less of a priority than making sure your service and gameplay are stable. And oh boy. Okay, so in the 120 hours I've been playing this game, I've only had a game-breaking bug or a complete server reset happen to me mid-game about a handful of times. More common for me are these minor issues and glitches, but they can be annoying, such as my microphone not working, not being able to set my ammo box or place garrisons properly. However, things like being unable to access my microphone, or in other cases where I'm unable to deploy from the overview, makes this a more serious issue. Usually resetting the game on Steam will solve it, and if all else fails, usually just verifying the integrity of the game files will solve any issues I might have. But still, these are some glitches that, although not new to PC shooters, especially indie shooters, might drive away some people who want something more polished that they'd find in a AAA game. With that being said, I will have to mention that the one thing I'm probably the most impressed by with this game is the dev team and their communication and updates with their community. Their Steam page always seems to have some bi-weekly articles, dev diaries on how updates are coming along, as well as a lot of Q&As from developers to the community. For better or worse, if you do find or know about an annoying bug, chances are the team is more than likely aware of it and trying to address it in a future patch. Whether the bug will be out by the next major update is another matter altogether. But the dev team does seem to care, and like I said, they do seem to care about their community that they built. And overall, that's really what I'd like to say about this game the most. It's a small developer studio. Community themselves are nice and fun to play with for the most part. If you can get a couple friends to go in this, or if you yourself have any interest in these large-scale shooters that kind of ride the line between simulation and arcadey-like shooting, then I really think that your money could be well spent on this game.
Yes, very poggers. Okay, I got all 3 notes set up.
Back to the meat grinder. Oh, fuck.
Well, thanks for watching, and if this game looked interesting to you, there's a link in the description. Next video I think I'll put out is something a little more relaxing.